in a quiet town called Brookmere, where winter felt heavy and the nights arrived too soon, there lived a boy named Elijah. He was just 18, but his eyes held the worry of someone twice his age. You see, Elijah had no family left. No mother, no father, no siblings. Just a rusty old bicycle that had once belonged to his mother. Every day, Elijah pedaled through the cold streets, delivering groceries and medicine for small change. He earned just enough to keep a tiny room, barely warm, barely safe. If he missed even one rent payment, he'd be out on the street with nowhere to go. That fear sat heavy in his heart, like a weight he could never put down. One evening, as the wind turned sharper and the street lamps flickered, Elijah had one last delivery to make. It was his chance to pay the week's rent and keep his small place. He couldn't afford to be late, not tonight. So he jumped on his bike, feeling the numb chill through his thin coat, and set off toward the far end of Brookmere. But then something caught his eye. At an old bus stop that no one seemed to care about, there stood a woman. She was small, wrapped in a wool coat that looked as old as time, her silver hair sticking out from under a bonnet. Her hands clutched a battered purse, and every few seconds she turned toward the empty road, as if waiting for a bus that was never coming. People walked past her without a second glance. They were too busy, too cold, too wrapped up in their own worries. But Elijah saw her, and something about the way she stood there, so lost and fragile, made his heart ache. She was mumbling softly. Something about Bus 12. Something about Garden Lane. Her voice floated across the icy wind, weak and scared. Elijah's chest tightened. He looked at the clock on his phone. If he helped her, he would definitely miss his delivery. If he missed the delivery, he would lose his room. That meant sleeping outside in this cruel winter. But then he looked at the woman again. Really looked. Her eyes were confused, almost like a child's, and her shoulders shook with the cold. He knew what he had to do. Elijah walked his bike over to her and spoke gently, so he wouldn't scare her. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you okay?" The woman looked up, startled at first, then her face softened. I think I missed my bus," she said, trying to smile through her confusion. She opened her purse and pulled out random things, a lipstick, a bus ticket from days ago, a folded tissue. But nothing helpful. Elijah noticed a delicate silver chain around her neck, with a small oval pendant resting against her coat. He leaned in and read the tiny letters. Clara Rose, 48, Fairview Heights. Fairview Heights. Elijah felt his heart sink. That was nearly 2 hours away by bike, and mostly uphill. If he took her there, he'd be giving up his place to sleep. But then she looked at him with so much trust, like she was placing her entire safety in his hands. He couldn't walk away. He tied his spare scarf around the back seat of the bicycle to make a soft spot for her to sit, and gently helped her climb on. "We'll go slow," he said softly. She gave him a gentle, grateful smile. "You remind me of my grandson," she whispered. Elijah nodded and started to pedal. The journey was long and bitterly cold. The road twisted and climbed, and the wind stung like tiny knives against his cheeks. But Elijah didn't stop. He pushed on, passing quiet fields blanketed with frost, crossing bridges lit only by the moonlight. Halfway there, he spent his very last dollar at a small gas station to buy Miss Clara a cup of hot tea. She insisted he take the first sip. "You need it more," she told him kindly, and Elijah's heart swelled with gratitude. They rested for a moment, sharing that small warmth, then continued their journey. Miss Clara hummed softly behind him, sometimes asking where they were, sometimes forgetting what he'd just told her. But Elijah answered every time, calmly, like it was the first time she'd asked. Finally, after what felt like forever, they reached the white gate of 48, Fairview Heights. It was almost 9:30 p.m. Elijah could hardly feel his legs, but he was relieved. He knocked gently on the door. An older man in a housecoat opened up, his face turning from panic to overwhelming relief. "Ms. Clara, where have you been?" She looked at him and chuckled. "I went for a ride." The man, probably her caretaker, was so grateful he nearly cried. He begged Elijah to come in, warm himself, have some food, even offered to drive him home. But Elijah shook his head. "Thank you," he said softly, "but I need to go." He scribbled his number on a torn piece of receipt and handed it over, in case she ever needs help again. Then he climbed back on his bicycle, even though every muscle in his body felt like fire, and pedaled back toward Brookmere. By the time he returned, the night was deep and silent. The light on the boarding house porch didn't work, like always. He reached into his pocket for the key and found nothing. His heart sank. He tried every pocket, every fold, but the key was gone. He looked down and saw his things in a plastic grocery bag by the door, with a note written in thick black marker. He had lost his home. Elijah stood there for a long moment, feeling the cold seep through his bones. But there was no time to stand still. He needed shelter. So he rode to Johnson's Market, a small grocery store where he sometimes worked for day-old bread. Mr. Johnson, the owner, opened the side door in a heavy bathrobe. When he saw Elijah shivering, he just sighed. "Storeroom's dry," he said. "Cots in the back. Don't freeze." Elijah nodded, thankful, and stepped inside. The room smelled of cardboard and oranges, but it was warm enough. He curled up on the cot, wrapped the thin blanket around his shoulders, and for the first time in weeks, felt safe enough to let sleep come. Because somehow, deep down, he knew he had done the right thing. Even if it cost him everything, he had chosen kindness. And that choice would change his life forever. Elijah woke up the next morning on a cold floor behind the grocery store. His back ached. His legs were sore. He had no blanket, no pillow, and no home. Just a small bag with a few clothes and a rusty bike leaning against the wall. He had given up his room, his comfort, and possibly his future, just to help a confused old woman get home in the snow. But Elijah didn't regret it. He sat up slowly and whispered to himself, "At least she got home safe." He didn't know it, but at that very moment, Miss Clara was sitting by her window, looking out into the cold morning. A nurse had come to check on her, and found the note Elijah left. She read it out loud. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "He helped me, and he left, with nothing." She remembered the cold night. She remembered Elijah's kindness, his steady hands, his warm smile, even when his lips were blue from the cold. That boy didn't just save her life. He gave her hope. She called her driver and said, "Find him. Whatever it takes. Find that boy with the bicycle." Later that day, Elijah was standing outside the same grocery store, wondering where to go. He had nowhere to sleep that night. He was thinking about knocking on doors to ask if someone needed help in exchange for food. Then, a black car pulled up quietly beside him. A man stepped out and said, "Are you Elijah?" Elijah nodded slowly. The man smiled. "Miss Clara would like to see you." Elijah froze. "Is she okay?" "She's better now," the man replied. "Because of you." Elijah followed the car back to the house. It looked just like he remembered. White fence, small garden, wind chimes by the door. Clara was waiting at the porch with a soft blanket around her shoulders and a steaming cup of tea in her hands. When she saw him, she stood up slowly. "Elijah," she said gently. He ran to her, and they hugged. She held him for a long time. "I remember everything now," she said. "You saved me, and you asked for nothing." He smiled. "I didn't do it for anything. I just didn't want you to get hurt." "That's exactly why I want you to stay," Clara said. Elijah looked confused. "Stay?" "Yes," she said. "This house is big, but my heart is empty. You reminded me what love feels like. Elijah shook his head. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness, ma'am. Clara took his hand. Kindness given from the heart is never a burden. That night, Elijah slept in a warm bed. Not just any bed, but a guest room Clara had cleaned and prepared herself. There was food on the table, fresh clothes in the closet, and a heater in the corner humming softly. For the first time in years, Elijah felt safe. Days turned into weeks. Clara and Elijah began sharing stories, laughter, and meals. He helped her in the garden, read to her every evening, and even got her to go outside on sunny days. And every time he tried to leave and find a job or a place of his own, Clara would stop him and say, "This is your home too, Elijah." Eventually, she said something even more surprising. "I want to help you go back to school." Elijah's eyes widened. "School? But I can't afford." "I didn't ask if you could," she smiled. "I asked if you wanted to." His lips trembled. Yes, I want to." So Clara helped him register. She bought him books, a laptop, even a new bicycle. Though Elijah still kept the old one in the garage, cleaned and standing like a trophy. Months passed. Elijah was now a student during the day and Clara's helper in the evenings. But their bond was more than that. They had become a family, one built not by blood, but by kindness. One evening, Elijah came home with an idea. "I want to start something," he told Clara. "A project." "What kind of project?" she asked. "There are so many people like me, and like you, lost, forgotten. I want to build a center, a place where orphans and lonely seniors can meet, help each other, and feel seen again." Clara's eyes sparkled. "We'll call it the Brookmere Light Project." And so they did. The Brookmere Light Project became a place of hope. Young people helped elders with technology, walked them through parks, cooked for them, and elders shared stories, gave advice, taught skills. The town slowly changed. People smiled more. The lonely felt loved. And Elijah became someone people looked up to. He wasn't invisible anymore. Years later, Elijah stood at the same bus stop where it all began. Snow was falling softly, just like that night. The wind was cold, but his heart was warm. He looked up at the sky, then down at the old bicycle he still kept, and he whispered, "Thank you." Because that snowy night didn't just save Clara's life. It saved his too, and all it took was one kind ride.